Welcome to Calming Bedtime Journeys channel. Tonight we step beyond the familiar streets of modern Edinburgh and enter a fortress surrounded by winter darkness, where stone walls hold the secrets of medieval lives. Have you ever wondered what it truly felt like to spend a freezing Highland night inside Edinburgh Castle in the year 1296? What sounds would follow you through narrow passages, and what small comforts would keep you warm when snow buried the world outside tonight? You will walk through those ancient halls and discover the ordinary moments hidden behind a powerful medieval stronghold. You will meet the guards, workers, nobles, and quiet figures whose names rarely survived history, yet whose daily struggles built the life of the castle. So, before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe, and while you listen, leave a comment with your location plus local time. It is always fascinating to imagine this old castle being explored by listeners from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, and you step into the cold air of medieval Scotland. You stand high above the surrounding landscape, where Edinburgh Castle rises from volcanic rock like a silent guardian watching over the settlement below. The year is 1296 and winter has already begun to tighten its grip across Scotland. The wind moves around the fortress walls with a low, steady voice. It slips between gaps in the stonework and brushes against your cloak as you approach the entrance. Your fingers feel stiff beneath your gloves, and the smell of smoke from distant fires mixes with the sharp scent of frozen earth. Snow gathers along the paths leading upward. The climb is uneven, and your boots press into patches of ice left by earlier travellers. You can hear the crunch beneath your feet, a simple sound that reminds you how exposed this world feels. The castle does not welcome you with warmth, it welcomes you with endurance. Edinburgh Castle in 1296 is not the polished tourist landmark familiar to modern visitors. It is a working fortress, a place of defence, administration, storage, worship, and residence. Its walls protect important people and valuable supplies, but those same walls also trap the cold that winter brings. You look toward the massive gates and imagine the many people who have passed through them. Soldiers carrying weapons, merchants bringing supplies, servants carrying baskets, messengers delivering urgent words, and nobles arriving with expectations of power. Everyone enters for a reason. Nobody enters without responsibility. This is the world you're stepping into. At this moment in history, Scotland is facing political uncertainty. The relationship between Scotland and England is becoming increasingly tense, and 1296 will become a significant year during the conflict between the two kingdoms. Edinburgh Castle itself will soon be caught within these struggles, changing hands during the wider events of the First War of Scottish Independence. But tonight, before battles and political decisions fill the pages of history, you focus on something quieter. You focus on living, because castles are not only places where kings make decisions, they are places where ordinary people wake before sunrise, prepare meals, repair clothing, clean rooms, carry water, and attempt to stay comfortable through another freezing day. You move closer to the entrance. The guards watch carefully from their positions. Their clothing is thick, but not designed for complete comfort. Wool layers provide warmth, while leather and metal offer protection. Their faces show the tired patience of people who understand that winter does not care about rank. The storm outside may be powerful. The watch must continue. Inside the gatehouse, the atmosphere changes slightly. The wind becomes quieter, replaced by different sounds. Boots strike stone floors. Wooden doors open and close. Voices echo through narrow corridors. Somewhere deeper inside the fortress, a fire crackles. That sound feels precious. Fire is survival. The people inside Edinburgh Castle depend on carefully managed fires for cooking, warmth, and light. Wood and other fuel sources must be stored because winter can make gathering supplies difficult. A careless mistake with resources could create serious problems when storms block roads and slow deliveries. You notice the smell of burning wood drifting through the passage. It carries familiar comfort, even in this harsh environment. For a brief moment, the castle feels less like a military structure and more like a home, although a very uncomfortable home. Medieval castles were rarely the luxurious places imagined in stories. Many rooms were dark, smoky, and cold by modern standards. Even wealthy residents had to adapt to conditions that required patience and practicality. You walk along the stone walls and feel the uneven surface beneath your hand. The rock is rough and cold. Generations of workers shaped these stones, placing them carefully to create a fortress strong enough to survive centuries. One curious detail about medieval castles is that some spaces were designed with unexpected features. Small openings, narrow passages, and unusual corners often served practical purposes rather than decoration. They helped with defense, movement, storage, and communication. Historians still argue whether some hidden areas within medieval fortresses were created for specific military purposes or simply developed through many generations of changes and repairs. The castle is not a perfect machine, it is a living structure. Every generation adds something, every winter leaves a mark. As you continue deeper inside, you begin noticing the rhythm of life around you. A servant carries a container of water. A worker checks stored supplies. A soldier warms his hands near a fire before returning outside. Nobody seems surprised by hardship. Hardship is simply part of the schedule. The people of 1296 do not think about comfort in the same way you might. Warm clothing, dry shelter, and enough food are not ordinary conveniences. They are achievements maintained through constant effort. The approaching blizzard makes every task more important. A simple journey outside the walls becomes dangerous. A missing supply delivery becomes a serious concern. A damaged roof becomes a problem that cannot wait. Yet within these challenges, there are also moments of peace. A shared meal, a quiet conversation, a small flame glowing against darkness, a familiar song echoing through a hall. These moments create the human side of the castle. The side often hidden behind stories of kings and wars. You pause near a window opening in the stone wall and look outward. The landscape stretches beneath a pale winter sky. Hills disappear into mist, and the first signs of heavier snow gather in the distance. The fortress stands ready. The storm approaches. And inside these ancient walls, hundreds of people prepare to spend another night together, relying on skill, cooperation, and simple determination. You take one final look at the entrance behind you. The heavy gates close against the growing wind, and the sound travels through the stone like a deep heartbeat. The castle settles, the winter begins. You wake to the muted sounds of the fortress beginning another winter day. The storm outside has grown stronger overnight, and the walls of Edinburgh Castle now seem to hold the entire world beyond them at a distance. The first thing you notice is the cold. It rests quietly. The air inside your chamber is not frozen, but it carries a sharp chill that reaches through your clothing. Your blanket feels heavy with dampness, and the stone beneath your feet steals warmth the moment you stand. Outside, the wind moves across the courtyard with a constant whisper. Snow brushes against wooden shutters, and somewhere above you, a guard walks along the battlements. His footsteps are slow. His duty is not. You prepare yourself to enter the daily rhythm of the castle, unlike a modern home, where many tasks can be completed with a quick movement or a simple device. Life inside this fortress depends on many people working together. Every person has a place. Every task matters. You leave the small room and walk through narrow passages where the walls seem to absorb every sound. The smell of smoke from nearby fires follows you through the corridors. It mixes with the scent of wool clothing, cooked food, leather equipment, and the earthy smell brought inside by wet boots. The castle is awake, Servants move carefully across the stone floors. Some carry containers, others prepare rooms, and others hurry toward the kitchens. Their movements are practiced because the same routines repeat every day. The entrance area becomes your first reminder that Edinburgh Castle is not simply a residence. It is a carefully organised community. The main gate is one of the most important parts of the fortress. It controls who enters, who leaves, and what supplies reach the people inside. In medieval Scotland, castles depended heavily on strong entrances because a weakness there could threaten everyone within the walls. You look at the heavy wooden doors reinforced with iron, they appear almost impossible to move. Yet every morning they must be opened, checked, and managed by the people responsible for security. The gatekeepers know that a castle is only as strong as the people maintaining it. A famous feature of medieval castles is their thick defensive walls, and Edinburgh Castle's position on Castle Rock gives it a natural advantage. The steep volcanic formation beneath the fortress makes approaching from many directions difficult. Nature itself becomes part of the defence. You walk upward and feel the uneven stone beneath your boots. The path is familiar to those who live here. But for newcomers, every corner requires attention. A person carrying supplies cannot simply rush through these passages. One wrong step could send a carefully prepared load tumbling. And nobody wants to explain that accident to the person waiting for the supplies. Medieval workers often lived with a practical sense of humour because daily life offered many small frustrations. A servant carrying firewood through a crowded passage, for example, might find more obstacles than expected. The castle creates problems, the castle residents solve them. You continue toward the inner areas where more private spaces are located. The people of higher status have rooms with greater privacy, but even their lives are shaped by the same environment. Nobles may have better clothing, larger chambers, and more comfortable furnishings. Yet winter remains winter. Cold stone does not care about titles. A person of wealth still waits for firewood to arrive. A person of authority still depends on servants preparing meals. A person with influence still listens to the wind outside the walls. The difference is not where the hardship exists. The difference is how it is experienced. As you pass through another passageway, you notice small details left behind by daily life. A wooden cup rests beside a doorway. A piece of cloth hangs near a fire to dry. A bundle of herbs sits near a kitchen entrance. These simple objects reveal more than grand stories of rulers. They reveal people. Historians studying medieval castles often rely on records, architecture, and archaeological discoveries to understand daily life. However, many details about ordinary routines remain uncertain because common workers rarely left written accounts. Historians still argue whether certain rooms within medieval Scottish castles were used mainly for domestic activities, storage, or occasional administrative purposes because the evidence can support several interpretations. The stones remain. The voices are gone. You move toward the courtyard where the weather becomes more noticeable. The open space between buildings allows the wind to return. Snow collects along corners and beneath wooden structures. The atmosphere feels alive. You hear animals inside the stable area. Horses shift their weight against the cold ground, their breath appearing briefly in the air. They are valuable companions because transportation, communication, and military movement depend on them. Nearby, workers prepare food and supplies. Medieval castles needed careful planning because winter could interrupt normal trade and travel. A castle was not simply defended by walls, it was defended by preparation. One unusual detail from medieval life is that castles sometimes kept specialized storage areas for items that might seem surprising today. Alongside weapons and food, people stored materials like wax, salt, cloth, and tools because replacing everyday items during difficult weather could be challenging. Small supplies could become important, a missing tool could delay repairs. A shortage of salt could affect preserved food. A lack of wax could reduce available lighting. You begin to understand that survival inside the castle depends on thousands of small decisions. The people living here are not waiting passively for winter to end, they are constantly adapting. They check roofs, protect supplies, maintain fires, and organise their work around the conditions outside. The coming blizzard is not a single dramatic moment, it is a long challenge. The castle residents know that the storm will test their patience. Snow may block roads, slow messages, and make ordinary tasks more difficult. Yet they continue. You stand near the centre of the fortress and watch the movement around you. A soldier crosses the yard, a servant carries a basket toward the kitchens, a worker repairs a wooden object beside a wall. Each person contributes to the life of the castle. Each person keeps the fortress breathing. The wind rises again, moving around the towers and walls. It sounds almost like the castle itself is speaking, reminding everyone inside that winter has arrived. You look toward the upper sections of Edinburgh Castle where the strongest winds strike first. The night ahead will be colder. The storm will become heavier. But for now, the gates remain secure, the fires remain lit, and the people within the stone fortress continue their daily routines. The castle stands, and everyone inside moves with it. You follow the narrow passage deeper into Edinburgh Castle, leaving behind the noise of the gate and entering the quieter spaces where people rest, work, and live. The stone walls surround you on every side. They are strong, but they are not gentle. Your hand brushes against the rough surface, and the cold texture reminds you that this place was built for protection first and comfort second. The builders of medieval castles understood strength better than convenience. Inside these walls, however, people still attempted to create something resembling home. A castle may appear from the outside as a symbol of power, but within its chambers, ordinary human needs remain the same. People need warmth, people need food, people need companionship during long nights when the wind shakes the shutters and darkness arrives early. You step into a living space where a small fire burns. The flames move softly, sending faint light across the room. The smell of burning wood fills the air, mixed with the scent of wool, dried herbs, and freshly prepared food from nearby areas. The warmth is limited, the comfort is precious. Medieval people had a different relationship with their homes than modern people do. Rooms were often designed for multiple purposes rather than separate functions. A chamber might serve as a place for sleeping, receiving visitors, storing belongings, and completing daily tasks. Space had to work hard, every corner mattered. You look around and notice simple furnishings. Wooden benches stand against the walls. A chest holds clothing and personal items. Thick fabrics provide some protection from the cold stone. There is no unnecessary decoration. There is practicality. The people living here understand that every object requires effort to create, repair, and replace. A wool cloak represents hours of labour. A wooden bowl represents the work of a skilled craftsperson. A candle represents materials gathered, processed, and carefully preserved. Nothing is truly disposable. Even small things carry value. You move through the castle imagining the different groups who share this space. Nobles occupy important rooms, but they are surrounded by many others who make daily life possible. Servants wake early to prepare meals. Workers maintain equipment. Soldiers protect the walls. Craftsmen repair what breaks. Each person has a role within the larger structure. A medieval fortress functions almost like a small village. It requires organisation similar to a community outside the walls, but with additional responsibilities because everyone must also prepare for danger. The castle cannot simply exist, it must operate. One of the most important spaces is the kitchen. You follow the smell of food and hear the sounds of activity growing louder. Pots move, wooden tools strike surfaces, voices call across the room. The kitchen is one of the busiest places in the fortress. Food preparation is not a simple daily task. It requires planning, storage, and coordination. During winter storms, supplies become even more important because travel becomes difficult. The cooks and workers inside this castle are not only preparing meals, they are managing survival. You notice the constant movement around the fires. People understand that warmth and cooking depend on maintaining these flames. A kitchen fire provides more than food. It creates a gathering place where workers exchange information and share moments of rest, even in harsh conditions. Human connection remains important. A quiet conversation beside a fire can make a difficult day feel shorter. A shared meal can remind people they are not facing winter alone. Historians know that medieval castles often had separate areas for different activities, but the exact arrangement of rooms at Edinburgh Castle in 1296 is not completely understood. Historians still debate whether certain sections of the medieval fortress served primarily as private residences, administrative areas, or flexible spaces that changed use depending on the immediate needs. A castle was not frozen in time. It changed according to circumstances. You continue walking and notice the contrast between authority and daily labour. A noble might discuss political matters in one chamber, while a servant quietly cleans another room nearby. Important decisions may happen above. Necessary work happens everywhere. The people who maintain the castle rarely appear in famous historical accounts, yet their effort allows the entire fortress to function. Without them, the grand halls would become empty spaces. Without them, the fires would disappear. Without them, the walls would protect nobody. You pause beside a doorway where a worker repairs clothing. The sound is gentle. Thread passes through fabric again and again. The person carefully restores something that might otherwise be lost. A simple repair, a meaningful act. Medieval clothing required constant attention. Wool garments were valuable because they provided warmth during her cold Scottish winters. A damaged cloak or tunic was not casually thrown away. It was repaired, it was reused, it was respected. You notice how much of medieval life revolves around maintenance. Buildings require maintenance. Tools require maintenance. Clothing requires maintenance. Relationships require maintenance. Survival is not always about dramatic moments. Often, it is about small actions repeated every day. Outside, the storm continues. Snow presses against the castle walls, and the wind creates a deep humming sound through the openings above. Inside, life continues at its own pace. The castle residents have learned how to live with the weather rather than fight against it. They understand that winter cannot be defeated. It can only be managed. This attitude shapes their world. Patience becomes a skill. Preparation becomes a habit. Cooperation becomes necessary. You walk toward a small chamber where someone has placed dried plants near the fire. Medieval households often used herbs for cooking, practical purposes, and traditional remedies. Some beliefs about these plants were based on experience, while others came from ideas passed down through generations. A curious detail is that medieval people often connected ordinary objects with symbolic meanings. Certain plants, colours, and materials could carry cultural or religious associations beyond their practical uses. The boundary between everyday life and belief was often very thin. A bundle of herbs could be both useful and meaningful. A piece of clothing could represent status and identity. A meal could represent hospitality and loyalty. As evening approaches, the castle slowly changes. Workers complete tasks. Fires are strengthened. Doors are checked. Supplies are counted. The fortress prepares for another cold night. You stand quietly inside the stone corridors and listen. The castle is full of sounds. The crackle of flames, the movement of footsteps, the distant voices of people sharing the same difficult season. These sounds are the heartbeat of Edinburgh Castle. Not the sound of battles, not the sound of kings, the sound of people living, and as the blizzard grows beyond the walls, you begin to understand that the true story of this fortress is not only about stone and defence, It is about the countless individuals who transformed a cold medieval stronghold into a place they could call home. The night has passed slowly inside Edinburgh Castle, and now the first faint light of morning reaches across the winter sky. You wake before the sun fully appears. This is not because of an alarm or a clock, but because medieval life follows the rhythm of nature. The castle begins moving when people have tasks waiting, when animals need care, and when fires must be restored after the darkness of night. The room remains cold, the air feels heavy. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and listen before standing. The fortress is never completely silent. Even during the early hours, you hear small signs of life. A piece of wood shifts inside a fireplace, a door opens somewhere nearby, footsteps travel across the stone floor. Outside, the wind continues its restless movement around the towers. Snow covers parts of the courtyard, and the morning light reflects softly from the frozen ground. You step into the passage and begin following the first workers of the day. For many people inside the castle, morning begins with preparation. There are fires to tend, rooms to organise, animals to feed, and supplies to check. The day does not wait. A servant carries fresh water through the corridor. The container is heavy, and each step requires care because the stone floor remains slippery from moisture brought in by boots. You notice the effort behind this simple task. Water does not appear from a convenient source inside every room. It must be collected, carried, and distributed. During a Highland winter storm, this responsibility becomes even more difficult because outdoor conditions can change quickly. The castle depends on routines. The routines depend on people. You enter the courtyard where the morning wind feels sharper. The open space allows you to see the strength of the fortress. High walls surround the area, and towers rise above the buildings within. Edinburgh Castle's position on Castle Rock has long made it one of Scotland's most important strongholds. The natural height of the rock provided a strategic advantage, allowing defenders to observe the surrounding area and control access routes. The landscape itself becomes a silent guard. You look outward and imagine the view available to medieval watchers. Roads below, distant settlements, and approaching travellers would all appear across the winter landscape. A guard standing there carried more than a weapon. He carried responsibility. The people watching the walls had to remain alert because information travelled slowly in medieval Scotland. A message from another region could take days or longer to arrive, especially during difficult weather. The arrival of a messenger could change the atmosphere inside the entire castle. A quiet morning could suddenly become urgent. A normal routine could quickly become preparation. Yet most days were not filled with dramatic events. Most days were built from ordinary actions. You follow a soldier toward the battlements. His clothing shows the practical needs of his role. Layers of fabric provide warmth, while protective equipment remains ready if danger appears. The cold affects everyone. Even those trained for hardship feel the bite of winter air. The soldier pauses and looks across the horizon. Snow moves in the distance, creating a soft curtain over the landscape. The view is beautiful, but beauty does not remove difficulty. Winter in medieval Scotland demanded endurance. The people living here understood the importance of timing. Food needed preparation before supplies became limited. Repairs needed attention before damage became serious. Travel needed planning before roads disappeared beneath snow. One fascinating detail from medieval castle life is that animals were often considered part of the household economy rather than simply property. Horses, dogs, and other animals had specific roles, and their care became an important responsibility during difficult seasons. A hungry horse could affect transportation. A neglected animal could create additional problems. Everything inside the fortress was connected. You return from the walls and enter areas where workers prepare the morning meal. The smell of cooking slowly replaces the sharp scent of snow and cold air. Steam rises from warm food. Wooden bowls are arranged. Voices become louder. The kitchen begins another busy day. Meals in medieval castles varied depending on wealth, location, and available resources: bread, grains, meat, fish, vegetables. And preserved food formed important parts of the medieval diet. For the people inside Edinburgh Castle, food was not only about enjoyment, it was planning, it was security, it was survival. You watch workers move with practiced efficiency. They understand their responsibilities because repetition has turned difficult tasks into familiar habits. The same person may perform similar duties every day for years. The castle remembers these routines even when the people themselves disappear from history. Researchers studying medieval households often examine surviving documents, building remains, and archaeological evidence to reconstruct daily life. However, many personal experiences remain hidden because ordinary workers rarely recorded their thoughts. The surviving evidence leaves researchers divided over how much independence lower-ranking castle residents had in organising their own daily routines. Some scholars suggest strict supervision, while others believe workers had more flexibility within their responsibilities. The truth may have existed somewhere between these views. Life inside the castle was structured, but people were still people. They found small ways to create comfort. You notice a servant quietly humming while arranging supplies. Another worker shares a brief joke beside the fire. A soldier smiles after receiving a warm drink. Tiny moments, human moments. The blizzard outside does not erase them. By midday, the castle has fully awakened. Fires burn brighter. Doors open more frequently. Messages move from room to room. The fortress feels like a living creature. Its walls remain still, but everything inside moves. You begin to understand that surviving a Highland winter was not only about strength. It required cooperation, patience, and thousands of small decisions made correctly. The people of Edinburgh Castle do not defeat the storm with one heroic action. They endure it together, as snow continues falling beyond the walls. You watch the workers return to their tasks. The same corridors you explored earlier now carry the sounds of another busy day. The morning disappears, the fortress continues, and inside this ancient stone world of 1296 life carries on one careful step at a time. The hours of morning slowly pass, and the heart of Edinburgh Castle becomes warmer, louder, and more active. You follow the sounds deeper into the fortress until you reach the Great Hall, a place where many important moments unfold. Here, people gather to eat, discuss matters, receive guests, and share stories during the long winter evenings. The first thing you notice is the size of the room. Compared with the narrow passages and private chambers, the Great Hall feels open and impressive. Wooden beams stretch above you. Smoke rises toward the upper parts of the room, and the glow of fire creates moving patterns across the stone walls. The atmosphere is different here. It feels alive. You hear conversations blending together. A servant places dishes on a table. Someone moves a wooden bench across the floor. The fire makes a steady crackling sound that fills the spaces between voices. The smell of roasted food drifts through the hall. It mixes with the scent of fresh bread, herbs, smoke, and damp wool clothing drying near the warmth. For many people inside the castle, this room represents more than a place to eat. It represents connection. Medieval castles were not only defensive structures, they were also centres of administration and social life. The Great Hall served as a place where the community inside the walls could gather together. You sit near the edge of the room and watch the movement around you. At the centre of the hall, those with higher status receive attention. Their meals, conversations, and decisions reflect their position within medieval society, but around them, countless others make the gathering possible. Workers prepare the food. Servants carry supplies. Musicians and storytellers provide entertainment when occasions allow. The Great Hall depends on everyone. A castle may have a lord at its highest level, but daily life requires cooperation from every person beneath him. You notice the arrangement of the room. Tables and benches are placed according to social order. Where someone sits can communicate their importance. In medieval society, position was visible. Clothing showed objects showed wealth. Even seating arrangements carried meaning. A person's place in the hall could quietly announce their role without a single word being spoken. The meal begins, food is brought forward, and the sounds of conversation grow stronger. Wooden cups touch the tables, knives cut through prepared dishes, people exchange stories about weather, travel, work, and events beyond the castle walls. Eating together creates a sense of belonging. This was especially important during winter, when snow blocked roads and storms reduced outside contact. The Great Hall became one of the few places where people could share experiences together. You imagine the evenings when the weather became too severe for outdoor activity. The fire would burn brightly while people gathered close, listening to tales of battles, distant lands, family memories, and local traditions. Storytelling was not simply entertainment, it preserved knowledge. A person who could remember events and communicate them effectively held an important skill. Before widespread printing and easy written records, spoken stories helped communities maintain connections with their past. A small curiosity from medieval gatherings is that entertainment did not always involve grand performances. Sometimes simple activities, conversations, music, and games provided enough enjoyment during long winter nights. People living centuries ago still searched for ways to make difficult seasons feel shorter. Their methods were different. Their needs were familiar. You walk closer to the fire and feel the warmth reaching your hands. The heat feels wonderful after the cold corridors outside. Yet the warmth is uneven. One side of your body feels comfortable while the other still notices the chill. Medieval fireplaces helped, but they did not transform stone buildings into modern heated homes. Large rooms remain challenging to warm, especially during severe weather. The people inside understood this reality. They adapted. They wore layers. They stayed near fires. They arranged activities around warmer areas. Comfort required planning. You look toward the upper sections of the hall where smoke collects. Medieval buildings often struggled with ventilation, and the constant presence of smoke was part of daily life. The people living here would have been accustomed to smells and conditions that might feel unusual today. Smoke was not always considered an inconvenience. It was part of survival. The fire provided warmth, cooking ability, and light. The cost was the smoke that followed. As the afternoon continues, the Great Hall becomes a place of conversation and decision-making. Officials may discuss supplies, visitors may deliver information, leaders may consider matters affecting the castle and surrounding lands. Edinburgh Castle existed during a period of major political tension. In 1296, King Edward I of England launched a campaign against Scotland, beginning a conflict that would reshape Scottish history. The castle would become connected to these wider struggles. But within the hall, history is experienced through ordinary moments: a person eating a meal, a worker carrying a cup, a guard listening quietly. Large events are built from small lives. You pause near the edge of the room and consider how many voices once filled this space. Most of those names are forgotten. The rulers may appear in historical records, the workers often remain invisible. Yet without them, the castle could not function. The Great Hall represents this balance. Power sits at the centre. Life surrounds it. Researchers continue examining medieval castle interiors because written descriptions rarely reveal every detail of how rooms were actually used. The available evidence does not always provide complete answers about whether certain areas were designed mainly for formal gatherings, everyday meals, or changing purposes depending on circumstances. The hall was not simply one thing, it adapted to the needs of the people inside. As evening approaches, shadows begin stretching across the stone walls, The fire becomes the brightest point in the room, creating a small island of warmth surrounded by darkness. You hear laughter from one corner, a quiet conversation from another, the movement of people preparing for the night. The blizzard continues outside, but inside the great hall, the castle feels connected. For a short time, the cold world beyond the walls feels distant. The people gather, the fire burns, the stories continue, and beneath the heavy stones of Edinburgh Castle. Another winter evening begins. The morning after the gathering in the great hall begins with the familiar sounds of work returning throughout Edinburgh Castle. The warmth of the previous evening has faded. The fires must be rebuilt, the rooms must be prepared, the supplies must be moved. You walk through the corridors and notice something important. A castle does not survive because of its walls alone. The stones may resist storms and enemies, but the daily efforts of ordinary workers keep the fortress alive. These people rarely stand at the centre of historical stories, yet they are everywhere. You follow a servant carrying a wooden bucket through the passage. The water inside moves slightly with each careful step. Her hands are covered, but the cold still reaches through the fabric. This is one of many tasks repeated every day. Simple work, necessary work. Inside a medieval castle, servants form the invisible foundation of daily life. They clean rooms, prepare food, carry messages, maintain fires, organize supplies, and assist those with greater social status. Their work begins early and often continues until late. There is little separation between duty and daily existence. A person's role shapes almost every moment. You enter the kitchen area again and see the cooks preparing for another demanding day. The room feels warmer than the rest of the castle, but the heat comes with its own challenges. The air is thick with smoke. The smell of cooking fills every corner. Pots hang above flames, and workers move carefully around each other. A kitchen inside a large medieval fortress is a place of constant coordination. A mistake could waste valuable ingredients, and during winter, replacing supplies may not be easy. The cooks are not simply preparing meals, they are managing resources. You notice baskets of stored ingredients nearby. Grain, preserved foods, salt, and other supplies represent careful preparation. Medieval castles needed strong systems for storage because weather and conflict could interrupt normal access to goods. A forgotten detail of medieval kitchens is that workers often use many parts of available ingredients rather than wasting them. In a world where resources required significant effort to obtain, practicality shaped cooking habits. Almost everything had a purpose, almost everything could be reused. You move toward the stable area where another group of workers begins their day. The smell changes immediately. Instead of smoke and food, you notice hay, leather, and animals. Horses shift inside their spaces. Their breath appears in the cold air. Stable workers check their condition and prepare them for possible travel or duties. These workers understand that animals are essential to the castle's operation. Horses carry riders, transport goods, and connect Edinburgh Castle with the outside world. A well-maintained horse can mean faster communication. A poorly cared for animal can create serious problems. The responsibility is quiet but important. You watch a worker brushing a horse's coat. The movement is slow and patient. There is a sense of familiarity between the person and the animal. Not every relationship inside the castle is based on command. Many are based on care. You continue through the fortress and meet craftsmen repairing objects damaged by daily use. A wooden handle is replaced. A piece of equipment is adjusted. Clothing is repaired. Medieval life depends heavily on skilled hands. A broken item cannot always be quickly replaced. Repair becomes a form of survival. The people who create and fix things hold valuable knowledge passed through generations. Their skills keep the castle functioning. A blacksmith understands metal. A carpenter understands wood. A tailor understands fabric. Each craft contributes to the larger system. You pause near a small workshop where tools rest beside unfinished work, the sound of hammering echoes gently through the space. It is not a dramatic sound, it is a steady rhythm, the rhythm of maintenance. The rhythm of people refusing to let ordinary problems become larger ones. The workers inside Edinburgh Castle live very different lives from the nobles above them, but their experiences are connected. A lord may have authority, but he still depends on the hands of others. The castle is a network of relationships. Everyone relies on someone else. During the harsh winter months, this connection becomes even clearer. A person who repairs a damaged door helps preserve warmth. A person who prepares food helps maintain strength. A person who carries supplies helps everyone continue. Small actions create large results. The importance of castle workers is something historians continue to explore, because written records often focus more on rulers and military events than everyday labour. The surviving evidence does not fully reveal how workers personally experienced their responsibilities, and researchers continue discussing whether castle servants had mostly controlled routines or some freedom in organising their own tasks. Their voices are quiet in the records, but their impact is obvious. You return toward the central areas as afternoon approaches. The castle feels like a carefully balanced machine. Fires burn where needed. Meals appear when expected. Supplies move from one place to another. None of this happens by accident. Behind every visible moment, someone has prepared it. You begin noticing the emotional side of this life as well. The workers are not only completing tasks, they are creating relationships. People who spend months together inside the same walls become familiar with each other's habits. They know who prefers certain tasks. They know who tells the best stories. They know who can repair a broken object quickly. A fortress during winter can feel isolated, but it is also a place where strong communities develop. The storm outside forces people closer together. The cold creates dependence. The walls create shared experiences. As evening approaches again, you hear workers finishing their final duties. Fires are checked. Animals are settled. Doors are secured. The day is complete. Another day survived. You stand in the corridor and listen to the quiet movement around you. The castle is preparing for another night beneath the Highland sky. The nobles may receive attention in future histories. The battles may fill the pages, but behind every important moment, there are people like these: the cooks, the servants, the stable workers, the craftsmen. They are the hands that keep Edinburgh Castle alive, and during the long winter of 1296 their work becomes one of the greatest defences the fortress possesses. The wind grows stronger as you make your way toward the highest parts of Edinburgh Castle. The sounds of daily work become quieter here. The voices from the kitchens fade behind you. The movement of servants becomes distant, in their place. You hear the steady force of the winter air moving across the battlements. This is where the soldiers spend much of their time, watching, waiting, protecting. You step onto the stone walkway and immediately feel the difference. The open sky surrounds you, and the cold reaches every exposed part of your body. Your cloak moves with the wind, and your fingers tighten around the ferrach. The view from here is impressive. Below, the landscape stretches across medieval Edinburgh. The settlement appears smaller from this height, with roads, fields, and scattered buildings disappearing into the winter haze. A guard beside you looks outward without speaking. He has learned that long watches are filled with silence. The responsibility of a medieval soldier is often imagined through battles, weapons, and dramatic moments. However, much of their existence involves waiting. A guard may spend hours observing the horizon, checking movement, and ensuring that nothing unusual approaches. The most important moments may never happen, but preparation remains necessary. You walk beside the guard along the wall. The stones beneath your feet have survived countless seasons, and the cold surface carries the marks of years of weather. The soldier checks his equipment carefully. His clothing must provide protection from the elements while allowing enough movement for his duties. Winter creates additional difficulties. A frozen hand affects grip. A heavy layer of snow affects movement. Poor visibility affects observation. A fortress may provide safety, but the people defending it still face nature every day. You look toward the outer landscape and imagine what a traveller approaching Edinburgh Castle might experience. The fortress would appear powerful and intimidating, rising above the surrounding area like a warning. That impression was intentional. Medieval castles were designed not only for defence but also to display authority. Their size, location, and appearance communicated strength before any conflict began. The castle spoke before its inhabitants did. By 1296, Edinburgh Castle had already existed for centuries and had become one of Scotland's important royal strongholds. Its strategic position made it valuable during the political struggles between Scotland and England. The wider conflict of that year would place the fortress at the centre of major events, yet for the soldiers standing here, history was experienced one cold watch at a time. You hear the sound of the wind passing through openings in the stone. It creates a low tone that almost resembles distant voices. The guard smiles slightly. He mentions that old places always seem to make their own sounds. A practical soldier may not believe every story told about castles, but people living in medieval fortresses often shared tales about unusual noises, mysterious corners, and places where strange events were believed to occur. An interesting detail from medieval military life is that soldiers did not spend every moment focused on fighting. They also needed skills in maintenance, communication, equipment, care, and organisation. A castle guard was part warrior, part caretaker. The walls required attention, the weapons required care, the watch required discipline. You move toward a section where guards can observe movement below. The position is carefully chosen because information is valuable. A person approaching the castle could represent many things: a merchant, a messenger, a traveller, or a threat. The guards must consider every possibility. During winter, this responsibility becomes more difficult because weather changes the appearance of the landscape and snow can hide tracks. Fog can reduce visibility. Storms can delay people who would normally arrive sooner. The weather itself becomes another challenge to interpret. You imagine the conversations between guards during long nights. They might discuss distant villages, previous storms, family members, or rumours carried by travellers. Even soldiers need moments of ordinary conversation. The walls do not remove human feelings. A person standing watch can still feel tired. A person carrying a weapon can still miss home. A person protecting a fortress can still wonder when the next warm meal will arrive. The evidence from medieval records gives some information about military duties, but many personal experiences remain difficult to reconstruct. The surviving documents often describe commands, payments, and important events rather than the thoughts of individual guards. Researchers continue examining how much medieval soldiers identified with their role as a profession, compared with seeing it as temporary service connected to obligation and circumstance. The answer may have changed from person to person. Not every guard looked at the castle in the same way. For one soldier, it might represent honour. For another, it might simply represent employment. For another, it might be a place far from family. You remain beside the battlements as snow begins gathering on the edges of the stone. The guard brushes some away before it becomes too thick. A small action, a necessary action. Winter demands attention. The soldier explains that storms can create unexpected problems. Snow can block pathways, damage equipment, and make movement between areas of the fortress more difficult. The castle must constantly adjust. A fortress is never completely finished. It requires care every day. As afternoon fades, the guards prepare for the changing watch. One person replaces another. A familiar routine continues. The new guard receives information about what has happened, where movement was seen, which areas need attention, what weather conditions are expected. Knowledge passes from one person to another. This simple exchange keeps the fortress functioning. You look once more across the winter landscape. The sky has become darker, and the approaching storm clouds appear heavier. The people inside Edinburgh Castle know what is coming. Another difficult night, another test of patience. But the soldiers remain at their posts, not because the cold is easy, not because the work is comfortable, because every person inside the walls depends on them. The kitchens depend on secure gates, the workers depend on protection, the nobles depend on order. The entire castle depends on the quiet vigilance of those who stand above it. The wind continues moving around you. The walls remain steady, and high above medieval Edinburgh, the guards keep watching the frozen horizon. The storm continues gathering beyond the walls of Edinburgh Castle and inside the fortress. Attention turns towards something that determines survival more than weapons or walls: food. You follow the movement of workers carrying baskets, barrels, and containers through the lower areas of the castle. Their steps are careful because every item they transport has value. A castle filled with soldiers still cannot survive without supplies. The smell of stored grain, dried herbs, salted foods, and smoke from nearby fires fills the storage areas. The air feels cooler here, protected from the strongest winds outside. Wooden containers line parts of the room, holding the resources needed to support the people living within the fortress. You run your hand across the surface of a wooden barrel. It is rough, it is practical. It represents preparation. In the medieval world, survival through winter depended heavily on planning before the cold season arrived. People could not simply travel to a market whenever they needed something. Roads became difficult. Weather slowed communication. A shortage could create serious problems. The castle had to think ahead. The people responsible for supplies carried an important responsibility. They needed to know what was available, what was being used, and how long resources might last. Every meal represented earlier decisions. Every fire represented earlier preparation. Every comfortable moment depended on work completed before the storm arrived. You enter a storage chamber where food is carefully arranged. Grain occupies an important place because it can be stored for long periods and transformed into different foods. Bread remains one of the foundations of medieval diets. It appears across social levels, although the quality and ingredients often vary depending on wealth and availability. For many people, bread is not simply something served beside a meal, it is a daily necessity. You watch workers preparing ingredients and notice how much effort goes into ordinary food. Grain must be grown, harvested, processed, stored, and prepared. A simple loaf carries a long journey behind it. Nearby, other preserved foods provide variety during the colder months. Salted meat and fish are valuable because preservation allows supplies to last when fresh resources become harder to obtain. The people of Edinburgh Castle understand that winter changes everything. A summer habit cannot always continue into a Highland storm. One established detail from medieval Scottish history is that castles relied on organised supply systems because they often needed to support residents for extended periods, especially during conflict or difficult weather. The strength of a fortress depended not only on defence, but also on its ability to sustain the people inside. You walk further and discover containers holding items used beyond cooking. Salt, for example, is extremely important because it helps preserve food and maintain supplies. In a world without modern refrigeration, preservation methods determine whether resources remain useful. A small amount of salt can influence an entire season. A forgotten detail from medieval kitchens is that spices and imported ingredients could sometimes appear even in Northern European households with wealth and connections. These items were not everyday necessities, but they could represent status, trade links, and hospitality. The presence of a rare ingredient could quietly reveal the reach of a household. You imagine a feast inside the castle hall, where a special item appears among familiar foods, for the people attending. Such details might represent generosity and importance. Yet most days are less dramatic. Most meals are practical. Most supplies are carefully measured. The people managing resources cannot waste what they have. You move towards another area where workers inspect equipment and materials. Winter preparation extends beyond food. Clothing, tools, and building materials must also be protected. A damaged item during a storm can become more than an inconvenience. It can become a serious obstacle. A broken tool may delay repairs. A missing piece of equipment may affect daily work. A damaged container may spoil stored food. Everything connects. The castle functions through countless relationships between objects, people, and routines. You notice a worker checking the condition of wooden storage boxes. He examines small details that others might ignore. A loose joint, a cracked surface, a weak handle. Attention to small problems prevents larger ones later. This careful mindset is essential during harsh seasons. The exact methods used by every medieval castle for managing supplies are not always fully known. Surviving records often describe large events and official matters rather than the daily decisions made by workers. Researchers have reached different conclusions about how centralized castle storage systems were during the 13th century. Some believe strict organization controlled every resource, while others suggest local workers had more responsibility in managing daily needs. The truth likely depended on the size, location, and purpose of each fortress. You leave the storage area and return toward the main rooms. The difference is noticeable. Here, you hear voices, you smell cooking, you feel the warmth from nearby fires. The supplies hidden away in quiet chambers become meals. Warmth and energy throughout the castle. They transform into life. The blizzard outside continues testing everyone. Snow covers paths. Wind pushes against doors. Travel becomes more uncertain. But inside Edinburgh Castle, preparation creates confidence. Not comfort exactly. Confidence. The people know they have planned as carefully as possible. They know where resources are kept. They know who's responsible. They know what must be protected. You pause near a doorway and watch workers continue their tasks. Nobody celebrates these moments of preparation because they are simply part of life. Yet these ordinary actions are what allow the castle to endure. History often remembers battles, rulers, and dramatic changes, but survival happens quietly. It happens in storage rooms. It happens beside kitchen fires. It happens through people counting supplies and repairing containers before they fail. As evening approaches, the castle prepares another meal. The smell of warm food spreads through the corridors, creating a feeling of comfort against the cold. The storm may continue, the nights may remain long, but the people inside the fortress have something important. They have preparation, and during a Highland winter, preparation can be the difference between fear and resilience. The daylight slowly disappears behind the winter clouds, and Edinburgh Castle begins changing its rhythm. The busy movement of the day becomes quieter. The workers finish their final tasks. The soldiers prepare for another night watch. The fires are strengthened, and doors are checked carefully against the cold wind outside. You walk through the corridors as evening settles over the fortress. The atmosphere feels different after sunset, during the day. The castle belongs to movement and responsibility. At night, it belongs to whispers, shadows, and small moments of rest. The first thing you notice is the light. Candles and fire provide only limited brightness, leaving parts of the stone walls hidden in darkness. The flames create gentle movements across the room, making the old fortress appear almost alive. The smell of burning wax mixes with smoke from the fireplaces. The air carries the scent of damp wool, wooden furniture, and food that has recently been prepared. You place your hand against the wall. The stone remains cold. The fire helps, but winter still surrounds everyone for the people living inside Edinburgh Castle. Nighttime is not a complete escape from hardship. It is simply another part of the daily cycle. You enter a chamber where people gather before sleeping. Some sit near the fire, Others repair clothing, prepare tools, or quietly speak with companions. These moments reveal something important about medieval life. Rest does not always mean doing nothing. Many people use evening hours for necessary tasks. A torn sleeve must be repaired, a piece of equipment must be adjusted, a personal belonging must be maintained. Time is valuable, nothing is wasted. You listen to conversations around you. A soldier talks about the weather. A servant mentions work planned for the following morning. Someone remembers a story told during another winter. The voices are calm. The storm outside feels distant. For a short while, the fortress becomes less like a military structure and more like a shared home. You notice that people create comfort through familiarity. They know the sounds of the castle. They recognize footsteps in the corridors. They understand the changing moods of the weather. A person who lives inside a fortress for months learns its personality. Every room has a sound. And every passage has a feeling. Every fire has a memory. Medieval households often organized sleeping arrangements differently from modern homes. Privacy was limited, especially among servants and workers. Multiple people might share spaces depending on their status, responsibilities, and available rooms. Life was more communal. The boundaries between personal and shared spaces were not the same as they are today. You walk toward the sleeping areas and notice the preparation involved. Bedding materials are arranged carefully because warmth is important during winter. Heavy fabrics provide insulation. Clothing may remain close by for morning. Personal items are stored safely. Even sleep requires planning. You imagine lying beneath layers of fabric while listening to the sounds of the fortress. The wind moves outside, the fire fades slowly, somewhere nearby. A guard continues his watch. The castle never completely sleeps. Small but fascinating detail from medieval nights is that people often use natural sounds to understand their surroundings. Changes in wind, animal noises, or unusual silence could provide information about weather or activity nearby. Before modern technology, awareness came from observation. People listened carefully, they watched closely. They learned their environment. You move toward the upper areas where guards continue their duties. Their experience of night is different from those resting inside. The darkness increases their responsibility. Visibility becomes limited. The weather becomes more important. A storm can hide movement and make familiar places difficult to recognize. The guards rely on routine and communication. They know where to stand, what areas require attention, and how to respond if something unusual occurs. Their work may appear simple from the outside, but constant awareness requires discipline. You look across the dark landscape beyond the walls. The settlement below is quieter now. Small points of light appear where fires burn in homes and buildings. The castle is not alone, it is part of a wider world. The people inside depend on the communities beyond the walls, and those communities depend on the protection and influence of places like Edinburgh Castle. The connection between fortress and surrounding society is an important part of medieval life. The castle is not isolated completely. It is connected through trade, messages, relationships, and obligations as the night becomes deeper. You return toward the warmer areas. A fire burns steadily, and people gather closer together. The conversation becomes slower. The voices become softer. The long winter evening creates space for reflection. You think about the lives around you. The soldier who spends hours watching the walls, the servant who carries water through freezing corridors, the cook who prepares meals before sunrise, the worker who repairs objects others depend on. Each person experiences the castle differently. Each person carries private hopes and worries. Historical records tell us much about rulers and major events, but ordinary nighttime experiences are harder to recover. The surviving evidence rarely explains exactly how medieval residents felt during quiet hours inside castles. The affair's available clues have led researchers to different interpretations about how much personal leisure ordinary castle workers enjoyed during winter evenings. Some believe strict duties occupied most of their time, while others suggest people still created moments of relaxation and social connection. The truth likely varied depending on individual circumstances. You remain beside the fire and feel the warmth reaching your face. Outside, snow continues falling against the walls. The storm has not disappeared. The cold has not weakened. But inside the fortress, people have created a small world of light and companionship. This is how they endure, not by escaping winter, not by defeating it, by sharing the difficult moments together. The candles burn lower. The voices become quieter. The castle settles into another night beneath the Highland sky. And as you close your eyes within these ancient walls, the sounds around you become part of the story. The fire, the wind, the steady heartbeat of a fortress still alive. The night slowly gives way to another winter morning, and from the heights of Edinburgh Castle, you begin looking beyond the walls. For several days, your attention has remained within the fortress. You have followed the workers, listened to the guards, and watched the careful routines that keep the castle alive. Now your eyes turn outward. The world beyond the stone walls is just as important as the world within them. A castle does not exist alone. It depends on the land around it. You stand near the battlements and feel the cold wind moving across the open space. The air carries the smell of snow and damp earth below you. The landscape stretches into the distance, shaped by hills, fields, roads, and scattered settlements. The winter view is quiet, but it is not empty. People are still moving through this landscape. Farmers continue caring for animals. Travellers follow difficult paths. Merchants carry goods between communities. Messages move slowly from one place to another. The castle watches over a living world. In the year 1296, Edinburgh was not the large modern city known today. It was a medieval settlement growing around important religious, commercial, and political centres. The castle occupied a powerful position because its location offered both protection and influence. The people inside the fortress were connected to the lives of those outside. Food came from surrounding lands, materials came through trade. News arrived through travellers, the castle depended on the region. The region depended on the castle. You walk along the wall and imagine the roads below during a normal season. People would travel between villages, markets, and larger settlements carrying goods and information. During winter, however, those journeys became more difficult. Snow changed familiar paths, mud slowed carts. Cold weather tested animals and travellers. A journey that seemed simple in warmer months could become dangerous when storms arrived. The people of medieval Scotland understood their environment deeply. They knew which paths were reliable, which areas flooded, and which routes offered shelter during difficult conditions. Knowledge of the land was a form of survival. You see a small group of travellers approaching in the distance. Their movement is slow because of the weather. They carry supplies wrapped carefully against moisture. The guards above observe them closely. Not every arrival is a threat. Many arrivals are necessary. A merchant might bring valuable goods. A messenger might carry important information. A visitor might bring news from another region. The castle gate connects two worlds. Inside are authority and defence. Outside are trade and daily life. One overlooked aspect of medieval travel is that journeys were often measured by natural landmarks rather than exact distances. People relied on experience, memory, and local knowledge because maps were far less detailed than those available in later centuries. A person who knew the land well could be more valuable than someone who simply carried written directions. You look beyond the roads and notice the farms scattered across the landscape. These communities provide much of the support needed by powerful places like Edinburgh Castle. The relationship between castle and countryside is complex. The fortress provides protection and political control. The surrounding lands provide resources and labour. Both sides are connected through obligations. During the medieval period, Many people lived according to systems where land ownership and service were closely connected. Those who controlled land often held authority over the people working on it. These relationships shaped everyday life across Scotland. You imagine farmers preparing for winter before the storm arrived. They would store food, protect animals, repair tools, and make decisions based on the coming months. Their struggles were different from those inside the castle, but the cold affected everyone. A noble in a warm chamber and a farmer beside a small fire both understood the power of winter. You return your attention to the castle walls and think about the communication between these different worlds. A message from outside could change the mood inside the fortress. News of political events could create urgency. Information about weather could influence decisions. A single traveller arriving through the gate could bring knowledge from places the people inside had not seen for weeks. Before modern communication, information moved at the speed of human effort. Every message had a journey. Every story had a traveller behind it. A fascinating little detail about medieval communities is that people often recognise visitors not only by appearance but also by clothing, equipment, and regional habits. Small details could reveal where someone came from or what role they held. A person's belongings carried information. A worn cloak, a particular tool, a style of footwear. These details help medieval people understand each other. You continue walking and imagine the sounds that would normally rise from the landscape below. The movement of carts, the voices of traders, the calls of animals, the activity of villages. Winter has quieted these sounds, but it has not erased them. The land is resting. It is waiting. The relationship between humans and seasons defines medieval life. People do not control nature, they adapt to it. The exact relationship between medieval castles and nearby communities is not always easy to reconstruct because records often focus on rulers, conflicts, and legal matters rather than ordinary exchanges between residents. The surviving evidence leaves room for different interpretations about how frequently common villagers entered castle spaces and how closely daily life connected the fortress with nearby settlements. Researchers continue examining archaeological findings to understand these relationships more clearly. You step away from the edge of the wall as snow begins falling again. Small flakes move through the air, catching the faint morning light. The storm reminds you that the castle story is not only about what happens inside. The world outside shapes everything within. The food, the messages, the supplies, the people. Edinburgh Castle is a stone fortress, but it is also part of a much larger landscape of human life. Beyond the walls, countless unnamed individuals continue their own winter routines. Inside the walls, others prepare for another difficult day. Different lives, different responsibilities, one shared season, and as the snow settles across medieval Scotland, you see the castle not as an isolated monument, but as a living centre connected to everything around it. The winter afternoon settles over Edinburgh Castle, and the sounds of daily labour slowly mix with quieter moments of reflection, beyond the practical struggles of food, warmth, and protection. Another part of medieval life shapes the thoughts of everyone inside the fortress. Faith, belief, tradition. You walk through the colder corridors and notice small signs of devotion around you. A simple cross hangs near a doorway. A person quietly speaks a prayer before beginning a difficult task. Someone touches a small religious object kept close for comfort. In 1296, religion is not separated from everyday life. It is part of the rhythm of existence. People do not only think about survival in the physical sense, they also seek meaning, guidance, and reassurance during uncertain times. The medieval world is filled with question. Why do storms arrive? Why does illness appear? Why do some people experience prosperity while others struggle? Many people look toward a faith for answers. You enter a quieter area of the castle, where the atmosphere feels different from the busy kitchens and crowded halls. The sounds become softer, footsteps slow, voices lower. Places connected with worship often create a sense of calm within medieval communities. For many residents, prayer provides a moment away from daily pressures. The cold remains, the responsibilities remain. But the mind receives a brief sense of peace. The Christian faith played a central role in medieval Scotland. Churches, monasteries, and religious communities influenced education, politics, art, and daily customs. Religious practices shaped the calendar, marking important days and seasons that guided how people organized their lives. The passing of time was not only measured by weather and work, it was also measured by sacred traditions. You imagine a person inside the castle preparing for a religious observance while snow falls outside. The person may have spent the morning completing ordinary duties, then later turned attention toward prayer and reflection. The physical and spiritual worlds existed together. A meal could begin with gratitude. A journey could begin with a blessing. A difficult decision could involve seeking guidance. Faith was woven into ordinary actions. You notice how people use small objects to express belief. A pendant, a carved symbol, or a written prayer could hold deep personal importance. These objects were not merely decorations, they represented connection. They represented hope. They represented a relationship with something beyond the visible world. One overlooked aspect of medieval spirituality is that many beliefs existed alongside official religious teachings. Everyday traditions, local customs, and older ideas continued to influence how people understood nature and unusual events. A storm might be viewed not only as weather, but also as something carrying symbolic meaning. A strange sound might become part of a local story. A particular place might develop a special reputation over generations. You walk through the castle during the evening and imagine the stories shared around the fire. Medieval people were surrounded by explanations that combined observation, religion, and tradition. They watched the natural world closely. They searched for patterns. They created stories to understand experiences beyond their control. This does not mean people lacked practical knowledge. Quite the opposite. A farmer could understand seasons. A sailor could understand winds. A soldier could understand defense, but practical knowledge existed alongside spiritual interpretations. The two worlds were connected. You pause near a window where snow covers the stone edge. The storm outside appears endless, and it is easy to understand why medieval people searched for comfort through belief. Winter could feel powerful, nature could feel unpredictable, faith offered stability. Inside the castle, religious ideas also influence relationships between people. Concepts of duty, loyalty, charity, and responsibility were connected to spiritual beliefs. A person's actions were not judged only by immediate results. They were also considered in relation to morality. How someone treated others mattered. How someone fulfilled obligations mattered. How someone responded during hardship mattered. The medieval world placed strong importance on reputation and duty. You watch a servant share warmth near the fire with another worker. A soldier offers assistance carrying supplies. Small acts of kindness exist even within a strict social structure. These moments reflect values that many people connected with their religious understanding. The evidence we have from medieval Scotland reveals much about official religious practices, but personal beliefs are more difficult to uncover because private thoughts rarely survive in written form. Researchers have reached different conclusions about how ordinary people balanced formal church teachings with local customs and personal traditions. Some suggest official religion strongly shaped daily thinking, while others believe older beliefs remained deeply present beneath the surface. The reality was likely a mixture. People inherited traditions. People adapted ideas. People created meaning from their own experiences. You continue through the castle and notice how belief appears in unexpected places. A person may whisper a prayer before entering dangerous weather. A worker may keep a small object for protection. A family may tell stories connecting their lives with generations before them. These habits reveal a very human desire, the desire to feel connected, the desire to understand, the desire to find comfort when the world feels uncertain. A curious detail from medieval life is that certain religious festivals and seasonal celebrations could transform ordinary routines. Even during difficult periods, communities found ways to mark important occasions through special meals, gatherings, music, and ceremonies. Celebration did not require perfect conditions. People created moments of joy wherever they could. As the evening deepens, the castle becomes quieter again. Fires glow in dark rooms. Voices become softer. Outside, the Highland wind continues moving across the ancient stones. The storm remains powerful, but inside Edinburgh Castle, people carry something more than supplies and weapons. They carry stories. They carry traditions. They carry beliefs passed from one generation to another. These invisible things help them endure. You stand beneath the old stone walls and consider the countless people who once lived here. Their names may have disappeared, but their hopes and fears remain familiar. They wanted safety. They wanted warmth. They wanted meaning. And during the long winter of 1296, those simple human wishes connected everyone inside the fortress. The storm that has been building around Edinburgh Castle now reaches its strongest moments. You wake before dawn and immediately sense the difference. The air feels heavier. The wind sounds louder. The fortress seems surrounded by a world of white and grey. Snow presses against the outer walls, and the cold reaches into every corner of the castle. The stone passages feel darker than usual, and even the strongest fires seem to struggle against the winter air. You wrap yourself in your cloak and step into the corridor. The first thing you hear is movement. People are already awake. A storm does not create a pause in medieval life. It creates more work. Servants move carefully through the fortress, checking rooms and carrying supplies. Workers examine doors and wooden structures. Soldiers prepare themselves for longer watches because poor weather can create additional risks. The blizzard changes everything. A task that normally takes minutes may now require much longer. A journey across the courtyard becomes an uncomfortable challenge. A simple delivery becomes something requiring planning. Winter demands patience. You walk toward the courtyard and immediately feel the force of the wind. Snow moves across the ground in small waves, covering footprints and hiding familiar paths. The world outside the castle walls appears distant. The surrounding landscape has almost disappeared. Only the strongest shapes remain visible. The towers, the walls, the nearby buildings. For the people inside Edinburgh Castle, storms like this are not simply uncomfortable weather events. They influence decisions, routines, and emotions. A fortress built for conflict must also survive nature. The cold tests buildings, the snow tests supplies, the wind tests everyone living within the walls. You enter the kitchen area and notice increased activity. The workers are not only preparing meals, they are also adjusting to uncertainty. More attention is given to supplies. More care is given to fires. More thought is given to what may happen if the storm continues. The people managing resources understand that food is not only about the present moment, it is about the days ahead. A preserved item used today cannot be replaced easily tomorrow. A piece of firewood burned too quickly may become important later. Every decision requires consideration. One surprising feature of medieval winter survival is how much people depended on observation. Before modern weather instruments, communities paid close attention to natural signs such as wind direction, cloud patterns, animal behavior, and changes in temperature. Experience became a form of knowledge. A person who understood the environment could make better choices. You watch a worker examining the sky through a narrow opening. He does not have a forecast written on paper. He has experience, he has memory, he has years of watching similar conditions. The storm also affects communication. Messages that normally travel between communities may be delayed. Travellers may wait before attempting dangerous journeys inside the castle. Uncertainty grows whenever expected arrivals do not appear. A missing messenger, a delayed supply cart, an absent visitor. Each absence creates question. The people inside cannot simply send a quick message through modern technology. Information must travel through physical effort. That reality shapes medieval decision-making. You move toward the sleeping areas and notice another challenge. Warmth. Even with fires burning, the cold remains present. Large stone buildings are difficult to heat, and winter conditions make every source of warmth valuable. People gather closer together. They wear additional layers. They organize their activities around the warmest areas. The castle residents understand that comfort comes from cooperation. A person sitting alone in a cold room feels the winter more strongly. A group sharing warmth feels something different. Companionship becomes a kind of protection. The surviving accounts from medieval Scotland provide information about storms, travel difficulties, and castle life, but they rarely describe every personal experience during extreme weather. The available evidence leaves questions about how long specific winter hardships lasted inside the individual fortresses, and how residents adjusted their routines during the worst conditions. Researchers compare architecture, climate records, and historical documents to better understand these experiences. You look around the fortress and notice how people respond. Nobody waits for the storm to magically disappear. They adapt. A servant moves supplies closer to safer areas. A worker strengthens a damaged section. A soldier checks equipment more carefully. The castle becomes a place of constant adjustment. The blizzard reveals the importance of small skills. A person who knows how to repair a door becomes valuable. A person who understands storage becomes valuable. A person who remains calm during uncertainty becomes valuable. Survival is not always about strength. Sometimes it is about knowledge. You walk through the corridors as evening approaches, and the sounds of the storm surround the fortress. The wind pushes against the shutters, snow strikes the walls, the fire continues to crackle. These sounds create a strange mixture of danger and comfort. The storm is powerful, but the people inside are prepared. A forgotten detail about medieval winters is that harsh weather could also create moments of unexpected closeness. When travel stopped and outdoor work became limited, people often spent more time together indoors, sharing stories, repairing objects, and strengthening relationships. Hard conditions could create stronger communities. You return to the great hall where several people gather near the fire. Their faces show tiredness, but also familiarity. They have experienced difficult days together. They know each other's strengths. They understand the importance of helping one another. Outside, the blizzard continues covering the landscape. Inside, the castle remains active. The walls block the worst of the wind. The fires provide warmth. The people provide support. The storm reminds everyone that medieval life is shaped by forces beyond human control. No ruler can command the snow to stop. No soldier can defeat the wind. No amount of authority can remove the cold completely, but people can respond. They can prepare, they can cooperate, they can endure, and beneath the ancient stones of Edinburgh Castle, that is exactly what they do. The worst of the blizzard slowly begins to weaken, but the silence left behind feels different from the quiet moments before. Edinburgh Castle remains surrounded by snow. Yet inside the fortress, another kind of activity begins, not preparation for survival, preparation for decisions beyond the warmth of fires and the routines of workers. The castle is also a place where power is organized. Messages are discussed. Responsibilities are assigned. Important choices are considered. You walk toward the chambers where officials and nobles gather. The atmosphere changes. The sounds are quieter. The conversations are more careful here. Words can influence events far beyond the walls. A medieval castle is not only a military structure, It is also a centre of authority. You enter a room where a small fire burns near the wall. The furniture is simple but arranged with purpose. A table holds documents, objects, and items connected with administration. The people gathered here are concerned with matters larger than the storm outside. They think about land, loyalty, resources, security. The world of medieval politics is built on relationships. A ruler's power depends not only on personal strength but also on agreements with nobles, officials, soldiers, and communities. Every promise matters, every alliance matters, every decision can affect many lives. The political atmosphere of Scotland in 1296 was especially uncertain. The relationship between King Edward I of England and the Scottish leadership had become increasingly tense, leading to military conflict and major changes in control over Scottish castles and territories. For the people living inside Edinburgh Castle, these events were not distant stories. They shaped their daily reality. A messenger arriving at the gate could bring news that changed everything. A command from a ruler could alter routines overnight. A shift in political power could determine who controlled the fortress. You imagine the discussions taking place inside these chambers. Officials may study reports, consider resources, and decide how best to respond to changing circumstances. Yet behind every political decision are ordinary people. A new order affects workers. A new leader affects soldiers. A new conflict affects families. Power moves through human lives. You look around the room and notice how different this space feels compared with the kitchen or workshops. The kitchen keeps people fed. The workshops keep objects working. This room directs choices. Each area serves a different purpose. Together, they create the life of the fortress. An interesting glimpse into medieval administration is that written documents were often treated as valuable objects. Records, agreements, and messages required careful creation and protection because written information could carry legal and political importance. A small piece of writing could influence a large number of people. Ink and parchment could become tools of authority. You watch a clerk carefully handling documents. His work requires patience and accuracy. A mistake in recording information could create confusion later. In a world where communication moved slowly, written words carried weight. However, not every decision inside medieval castles was recorded. Many everyday negotiations happened through conversation, personal relationships, and traditions. The surviving evidence does not fully reveal how much influence ordinary castle residents had during periods of political change. Researchers continue examining whether people working within royal fortresses simply followed orders or sometimes shaped events through local knowledge and practical decisions. Power was not always only found at the top. Sometimes it moved quietly through many hands. You leave the chamber and return to the main areas of the fortress. The contrast is clear. A soldier sharpens equipment. A servant carries supplies. A worker repairs damaged materials. These people may not discuss politics directly, but political decisions affect their lives constantly. A command about defense changes a soldier's routine. A decision about supplies changes a worker's responsibilities. A change in leadership changes the atmosphere throughout the castle. Politics is not separate from daily life. It enters every room. You walk through a corridor where voices from different groups overlap. A guard speaks with a servant. A messenger waits near an entrance. A worker carries materials toward a repair area. The fortress brings together people with different positions and responsibilities. Their experiences are not equal. A noble and a servant do not live the same life. A commander and a worker do not hold the same authority, yet they share the same walls. They share the same weather. They share the same uncertainty. A small but revealing habit from the period was the importance placed on visible signs of rank. Clothing, equipment, and behaviour often communicated a person's position within society. People could understand social differences without anyone explaining them. A fine garment, a particular object, a certain way of speaking all could reveal status. You return to the battlements as evening approaches. The snow-covered landscape looks peaceful now, but you know that beneath this calm surface, decisions continue shaping the future. The castle is both a home and a symbol. It protects people, it represents power, it reflects the struggles of the age. The same walls that shelter workers from the storm also represent the authority of those who control them. This dual nature defines medieval fortresses. They are places of safety and places of influence. They are homes and instruments of power. They are built from stone, but their true importance comes from the people who use them. As darkness settles again, you hear the familiar sounds returning. The fire, the footsteps, the quiet movement of another evening. The political discussions may continue behind closed doors. The workers may continue their routines. The guards may continue watching the horizon. Different lives, different responsibilities, one shared fortress. And inside Edinburgh Castle during the winter of 1296, power is not an abstract idea. It is something felt in every room, carried through every message, and experienced by every person living beneath the ancient stone walls. The storm has passed its most demanding moment, and Edinburgh Castle slowly returns to a familiar rhythm. The snow remains, the cold remains, but the people inside the fortress begin finding space again for smaller moments of life. Not every day is defined by danger. Not every hour is filled with urgent work between responsibilities. People create small pieces of comfort. You walk through the quieter sections of the castle and begin noticing details that would easily disappear beneath the larger stories of kings, battles, and politics. A wooden carving beside a doorway, a repaired piece of clothing hanging near a fire, a simple cup placed carefully on a table. These objects reveal something important. People lived here, not symbols, not figures from distant history. People. They laughed, they worried, they became tired, they looked for moments of happiness even during difficult seasons. You enter a room where several workers gather after completing their tasks. The fire burns gently, and the atmosphere feels warmer than the stone corridors outside. Someone tells a story. Someone repairs a damaged item. Someone simply rests. These quiet moments are easy to overlook, but they are often the closest connection to understanding ordinary medieval life. A castle is not only remembered through major events, it is remembered through everyday experiences. You sit near the fire and listen to conversations around you. The voices are relaxed compared with the serious discussions of officials and guards. People talk about familiar things, the weather, the work, the food, the people they know, the ordinary concerns of daily existence centuries later. These concerns still feel recognizable. Human beings continue searching for comfort, friendship, and connection. The difference is the environment surrounding them. The people of 1296 live in a world where survival requires more physical effort. Lighting a room, preparing food, repairing clothing, and staying warm all demand time and skill, yet these challenges do not remove creativity. They encourage it. You notice how people personalize their surroundings despite limited resources. A carefully arranged object, a decorated piece of clothing, or a small personal belonging can transform a cold space into something more familiar. Home is not only created through luxury, it is created through attachment. One unusual feature of medieval households was the importance of multi-purpose objects. Many items served several roles because producing materials required significant labour. A container might store food today and hold another valuable item tomorrow. A piece of fabric might become clothing and later be repaired into something else. Objects often continued changing throughout their useful lives. Nothing was easily abandoned. You walk toward the sleeping areas and imagine the private thoughts of people preparing for another night. A servant may think about tomorrow's responsibilities. A soldier may remember family far away. A craftsman may consider unfinished work. A noble may worry about political decisions, different positions, different concerns, shared humanity. The medieval world was highly structured, with clear differences between social groups. However, those differences did not remove the emotions connecting people. Everyone experienced uncertainty. Everyone experienced hope. Everyone experienced the need for rest. You notice a young worker carefully repairing a small object beside the fire. The task appears simple, but the attention given to it shows patience. In modern life, many damaged things are replaced quickly. Here, repair is expected. Skill matters. Time matters. Care matters. The ability to fix something can be as valuable as the ability to create something new. Records from medieval Scotland often focus on rulers, military campaigns, and legal matters, which means many personal stories remain hidden. The evidence available today does not provide a complete picture of how ordinary castle residents spent their leisure time or expressed personal identity. Researchers continue comparing household objects, archaeological discoveries, and written sources to better understand these quieter parts of medieval existence. The missing details invite imagination, but they also require caution. You cannot know every thought, you cannot hear every conversation, but you can see the traces people left behind. A worn staircase shows movement. A repaired object shows care. A marked piece of stone shows repeated use. The castle itself becomes a record. You move toward the Great Hall again as evening approaches. The room feels different from the formal gatherings described earlier. Now it feels familiar. A place where people return after work. A place where stories are shared. A place where tired individuals become a community. The fire creates a soft glow across the room. Shadows move along the walls, and the smell of warm food fills the air. Someone begins telling a story from memory. Perhaps it is about a previous winter. Perhaps it is about a distant place. Perhaps it is simply a funny event from everyday life. Small stories matter. They make difficult conditions easier to endure. A fascinating glimpse into medieval social life is that humour remained important even during challenging periods. People living centuries ago were not only focused on survival, they also joked, teased, celebrated, and found amusement in ordinary situations. Laughter could exist beside hardship, warmth could exist beside cold, joy could exist beside uncertainty. You look around the Great Hall and imagine all the generations who experienced similar evenings. The names of many individuals have disappeared, but their habits feel familiar. They gathered, they talked, they rested, they continued. The castle no longer feels like only a fortress, it feels like a collection of memories. Every room contains traces of human activity. Every passage carries echoes of movement. Every fire represents countless evenings spent seeking warmth. Outside, the winter landscape remains silent beneath the snow. Inside, life continues. The people of Edinburgh Castle do not know exactly what future historians will remember about them. They are not thinking about becoming part of history. They are simply living. They are completing tasks. They are caring for one another. They are waiting for another morning. And perhaps this is the most meaningful part of their story. Not the battles, not the politics, not the grand decisions. The quiet moments, the ordinary hours, the simple experiences that make a stone fortress feel like home. The first signs of change arrive quietly. At first, you notice only small differences. The wind is softer. The snow falls more gently. The heavy clouds above Edinburgh Castle begin to separate, allowing thin lines of pale light to reach the frozen landscape. The great Highland blizzard that surrounded the fortress for so long is finally beginning to release its grip. You step outside into the courtyard and feel the change immediately. The air is still cold, the stones are still covered with frost, but something feels lighter. The people inside the castle sense it too, after days of intense weather. Even small improvements bring a feeling of relief. Workers move with slightly more confidence. Guards look farther across the horizon. Servants open doors without immediately fighting against the wind. The fortress begins breathing more easily. You walk through the courtyard and see the marks left behind by the storm. Snow has gathered against walls and entrances. Paths that were once familiar now appear different beneath the frozen layers. The blizzard has changed the appearance of everything, yet the castle remains. This moment reveals an important truth about medieval life. Survival is not only about enduring hardship, it's also about recovery afterward. When the worst conditions pass, people must restore what was damaged and rebuild normal routines. A storm does not disappear without leaving consequences. You follow workers as they inspect the fortress. Their first task is observation. They examine doors, they check roofs, they look at storage areas, they search for problems hidden beneath the snow. The careful attention given to these details reflects the practical knowledge of medieval communities. People understood that small damage could become larger problems if ignored. A loose wooden panel could allow cold air inside. A damaged roof could threaten stored supplies. A weakened structure could become dangerous later. Maintenance continues even after danger fades. You walk toward the outer areas where workers begin clearing pathways. The sound of tools against frozen ground creates a steady rhythm. It is not dramatic, it is necessary. The same people who endured the storm now repair its effects. Their work shows patience, their work shows experience, their work keeps the fortress functioning. During the medieval period, castles required constant attention because they were living environments rather than empty monuments. Walls, buildings, equipment, and supplies all needed regular care. The castle was never simply finished. It was always being maintained. You notice soldiers helping with practical tasks alongside their usual duties. A guard may not only stand on the walls, he may also assist with moving materials, checking equipment, or supporting repairs after difficult weather. The boundaries between roles are often more flexible than they appear. Everyone contributes when necessary. One small detail from medieval recovery practices is that communities often reused materials whenever possible. Damaged wood, cloth, and tools could be repaired or adapted rather than immediately discarded. Resourcefulness was not just a preference, it was a necessity. You watch a worker examine a damaged piece of wood and consider how it might be used again. The object has a history already. It has served one purpose, or now it may serve another. This way of thinking shapes medieval life. Nothing exists separately. Everything has potential value. You continue through the castle and notice how the mood has changed. During the height of the storm, every person seemed focused on immediate needs. Now there is space for planning. People begin discussing the days ahead. Supplies can be reviewed. Travel can be considered. Messages can be prepared. The castle begins reconnecting with the wider world. For a place that has spent days surrounded by snow and isolation, this return to communication feels significant. A messenger preparing to leave carries more than information. He carries connection. He carries news between communities. He carries proof that the fortress is active again. The political importance of Edinburgh Castle during the late 13th century meant that communication and movement were essential. The fortress was not only a residence but also a strategic location connected to wider events across Scotland. The storm may temporarily slow history, it does not stop it. You stand near the gate and watch preparations beginning. The heavy doors that have protected the castle during the worst weather now become symbols of returning activity. People approach. People leave. The outside world begins reaching the fortress again. The exact experiences of medieval communities recovering from severe storms are difficult to establish because detailed personal accounts are rare. The surviving clues provide information about architecture, supplies, and historical events, but many everyday responses remain uncertain. Researchers continue studying how medieval households balanced immediate repairs with longer-term recovery after difficult seasons. Each fortress likely developed its own methods. Each community adapted differently. You return toward the Great Hall, where the atmosphere feels warmer and more hopeful. The conversations are no longer focused only on the storm. People begin talking about ordinary matters again, future plans, upcoming tasks, expected arrivals. The simple return of routine becomes something worth appreciating. You realize that normal life itself is a form of comfort, a familiar meal, a familiar conversation, a familiar path through the castle. These things provide stability after uncertainty. As evening arrives, the remaining snow reflects the last light of the day. The castle walls glow softly against the winter sky. The storm has changed the fortress. It has tested everyone inside, but it has also revealed something important. A castle is not strong only because of its stone. It is strong because of the people who care for it, the workers who repair, the soldiers who protect, the servants who maintain, the families who endure, the community that continues. You look across the courtyard one final time as the day ends. The blizzard has passed, but its memory remains in every footprint, every repaired object, and every conversation about the difficult days behind. The fortress has survived, the people have survived, and now, slowly, life begins moving forward again. The days after the Great Highland Blizzard feel different inside Edinburgh Castle. The fortress is still surrounded by the reminders of the storm. Snow remains along the walls, ice covers shaded corners, the wind still carries the sharp scent of winter. But the feeling has changed. The castle is no longer simply enduring, it is recovering. You walk through the courtyard in the morning and notice how movement has returned. Footsteps cross the frozen ground. Workers carry materials between buildings. Servants continue their familiar routines. The rhythm of life has returned, slowly, carefully. The storm forced everyone inside the fortress to focus on immediate survival. Now their attention expands again toward the Fung. There are repairs to complete, supplies to organize, connections to restore. A medieval fortress cannot remain frozen in a single moment. It must continue adapting. You follow a group of workers examining sections of the castle that face the strongest winds. They check wooden structures, entrances, and areas where snow collected heavily. Their work is practical, their movements are experienced. They understand that recovery requires patience. A damaged area cannot simply be ignored because the weather has improved. The next storm may arrive. The next challenge may come. Preparation never truly ends. You notice how the castle begins returning to its ordinary patterns. The kitchens become busy again. The great hall fills with conversation. The guards resume regular watches rather than focusing only on weather conditions. The fortress slowly reconnects with itself. During medieval times, castles served many purposes beyond defence. They were residences, administrative centres, storage locations, and symbols of authority. Edinburgh's castle's importance came from this combination of practical and political roles. It was a place where people lived, a place where decisions were made, a place where Scotland's changing circumstances could be experienced directly. You walk toward the gate and see preparations for a new travel. The heavy doors open more frequently now. Visitors arrive. Messages leave. Supplies move again. The outside world returns, after days of isolation. Even a simple arrival feels meaningful. A traveller carrying news from another settlement brings more than words. He brings connection. You imagine the conversations that follow. People ask about conditions beyond the walls. They want to know which roads remain difficult, which communities need assistance, and what events have occurred while the storm blocked movement. Information becomes valuable again. The castle is no longer separated from the wider landscape. You notice that recovery is not only physical, it is emotional. The people inside have shared a difficult experience. They remember the cold nights, the limited movement, and the uncertainty created by the storm. Hardship creates memories. Those memories become part of the community. A worker who repaired a damaged structure may later remember that winter. A guard who watched through the blizzard may tell the story years afterward. A servant who carried supplies during the storm may remember the people who helped along the way. Small experiences become personal history. One unusual practice from medieval households was the habit of passing knowledge through observation and imitation rather than formal instruction. Skills such as repairing tools, preparing food, caring for animals, and maintaining buildings were often learned by watching experienced workers. Knowledge moved through people, not only through books. You follow the young worker learning from an older craftsman. The older person demonstrates the technique slowly, explaining through actions as much as words. This relationship connects generations. It allows the castle to continue functioning. The knowledge of the past becomes the survival tool of the future. You enter a quieter chamber where officials discuss upcoming plans. The tone is different from the earlier political meetings. There is less urgency, more stability. The storm has passed, but responsibilities remain. Decisions must still be made. The castle must still serve its purpose. The available records from this period describe major political events more clearly than ordinary recovery efforts. The full picture remains incomplete because many details about how communities rebuilt routines after severe weather were never written down. Modern interpretations differ when considering how quickly medieval households could return to normal activity after major disruptions. Some researchers emphasize the slow difficulties caused by limited resources, while others highlight the adaptability that allowed communities to recover effectively. Both perspectives reveal something important. Medieval people were vulnerable, but they were also capable. You continue through the castle and notice signs of ordinary life returning. A repaired object rests beside a wall. Fresh supplies appear in storage areas. A fire burns steadily in a room that was once colder. These small changes create a sense of progress. Recovery rarely arrives all at once. It appears through small improvements. A warmer room, a repaired door, a familiar routine. The people of Edinburgh Castle understand this better than anyone. They do not expect winter to disappear completely. They simply prepare for the next day. As evening approaches, you return to the battlements. The view has changed again. The landscape is clearer. The snow reflects the fading light. The roads below are visible once more. The castle looks outward toward a world that has been hidden for a time. You think about everything this fortress has witnessed. Generations of workers, different rulers, changing conflicts, countless winters. Yet the daily experiences remain surprisingly similar. People still wake. People still work. People still seek warmth and companionship. The stone walls have survived because generations of people cared for them. The fortress is not alive in the way a person is alive, but through the actions of those who inhabit it. It carries a kind of memory. Every repaired beam, every worn step, every mark on the stone tells a quiet story. The blizzard of 1296 becomes one more chapter in that long history. A chapter not only about weather, a chapter about endurance, a chapter about ordinary people who continued living inside an extraordinary place. And as darkness settles over Edinburgh Castle once again, the fortress feels peaceful, not because challenges have disappeared, because people have learned how to face them. The final morning arrives quietly over Edinburgh Castle. You wake before the first strong light reaches the horizon, and for a moment, the fortress feels suspended between night and day. The fires have burned lower. The corridors are calmer. The winter wind moves gently around the ancient stones. You step outside and feel the cold air touching your face. It is still sharp, but it no longer carries the same force as the blizzard that surrounded the castle days before. The storm has become a memory. Below you, Edinburgh begins to emerge from the pale morning mist. Snow covers parts of the landscape, but signs of movement have returned. Smoke rises from homes. Paths become visible again. People begin another day. From the battlements, You look across the fortress and remember everything you have witnessed. The guards standing through freezing nights, the servants carrying supplies through narrow corridors, the workers repairing objects and buildings, the cooks preparing meals beside warm fires, the quiet conversations shared during the darkest hours. These moments created the true life of Edinburgh Castle. Not only the battles, not only the rulers, not only the political decisions recorded in history, the human details remain the most powerful. You walk through the courtyard one final time. The stones beneath your feet carry the marks of countless footsteps. A soldier once crossed this path while beginning a watch. A servant once hurried here carrying food. A child may have once played near these walls. A worker may have repaired these same stones during another winter. The castle contains traces of many lives. Most names have disappeared. Most voices are silent, but their presence remains. By the late 13th century, royal fortresses like Edinburgh Castle represented more than military strength. They reflected government, social organisation, and the relationship between rulers and the communities around them. The fortress was a place where history moved. Yet history was also created through ordinary actions. A person lighting a fire, a person preparing bread, a person closing a gate, a person helping another through a difficult season. You pause near the entrance and imagine the many departures that happened here throughout the centuries. Some people left for travel, some left for conflict, some left simply to continue their daily responsibilities elsewhere. The gate connected the castle with the world beyond. It was a boundary, but not a complete separation. The fortress depended on movement. Without travellers, there would be fewer messages. Without workers, there would be no functioning household. Without surrounding communities, there would be no supplies. A castle may appear isolated from a distance, but inside its walls, countless connections exist. You look back toward the great hall where the sounds of life once filled the space. The memories of warm fires and shared conversations seem almost present. You can almost hear the voices, the laughter, the quiet discussions, the footsteps crossing the floor. The hall was never only a room, it was a place where people experienced life together. A small detail from medieval castle life is that many spaces changed meaning depending on the moment. A hall could become a dining area, a meeting place, a place for celebration, or simply somewhere people gathered for warmth. Rooms were shaped by human needs, not only by architecture. You continue upwards toward the battlements once more. The morning light grows stronger. The sky becomes clearer. The winter landscape stretches before you. For a final moment, you consider the people who lived through the great storm of 1296. They did not know they would become part of a story remembered centuries later. They were not trying to create history, they were trying to live. That may be what makes their experiences so meaningful. Their lives were built from ordinary moments. The available evidence allows us to understand parts of medieval castle life, but many personal stories remain beyond our reach. The exact feelings, conversations, and private memories of those who endured winters inside Edinburgh Castle cannot be fully recovered. What remains is a collection of traces, buildings, objects, records, tradition, together. These pieces allow us to imagine the world they inhabited. Researchers continue exploring medieval Scotland because every discovery adds another layer to understanding how people survived, worked, and found meaning within challenging environments. The story of the castle is never completely finished. New perspectives continue appearing, new questions continue forming, and perhaps that is fitting. A place like Edinburgh Castle has existed through many generations. It has always carried stories. You stand at the highest point of the fortress and watch the sunrise spread across the landscape. The snow reflects the gentle morning light. The wind becomes softer. The world feels still. For a moment, you are no longer thinking about battles or politics. You're thinking about people. The person who carries the water, the person who watched the walls, the person who shared food beside the fire, the person who repaired a small object instead of throwing it away. Their lives were not grand in the way kings and warriors are often remembered, but their experiences created the reality of the castle. Without them, the fortress would have been only stone. Because of them, it became a home. Now, as you prepare to leave this medieval winter behind, the sounds of the castle slowly fade, the footsteps become distant, the fires become quieter, the voices disappear into the morning air. You walk away from the ancient walls carrying the memory of a place where people faced cold, uncertainty, and hardship with patience and cooperation. The castle remains behind you, still standing, still watching over Edinburgh, still holding the echoes of those who once lived within its walls. And now, as the story gently comes to an end, you allow yourself to rest. The image of the fortress becomes softer. The stone walls fade into the winter mist. The snow-covered landscape grows quiet. You imagine the fires glowing warmly inside the rooms. You imagine peaceful footsteps moving through the corridors. You imagine the people of 1296 settling into another evening. Safe within the walls they work so hard to protect. The wind moves slowly across the hills. The sky darkens peacefully. The old castle remains beneath the stars, and the lives of those who lived there continue into memory. As you drift away from the medieval world of Edinburgh Castle, let the final images become gentle and calm. Picture the ancient stone resting beneath a quiet sky, no longer surrounded by the harsh sounds of the blizzard, but by the soft movement of winter air. Imagine warm fires glowing in distant chambers, casting peaceful light across wooden tables and silent corridors. The people who once walked these paths have long since departed, yet their simple moments remain preserved through time, their work, their kindness, their patience, and that their determination created a story that reached far beyond their own lives. Allow yourself to imagine the castle slowly settling into the night. The guards have completed their watches, the workers have finished their tasks, the fires continue burning softly as the fortress rests. Outside, the snow covers the landscape like a quiet blanket, protecting the memories hidden beneath it. You breathe slowly and leave behind the cold winds of medieval Scotland. The walls of Edinburgh Castle fade into the distance, becoming part of a peaceful dream. The voices, footsteps, and fires become softer with every passing moment. The journey is over, the castle is quiet, the winter night is gentle, and somewhere beyond the mist, the ancient stones continue holding the stories of everyone who once called this fortress home. Sleep well.